Hello and welcome to a special Blood Red podcast with myself, Matt Addison, here to react to the news that Liverpool are hopeful of completing a £49 million transfer deal for Porto forward Luis Diaz before the transfer deadline at 11 p.m. on Monday. It's understood that Liverpool are heading over to South America to complete the deal, where Diaz is, of course, currently on international duty for Colombia. It's not done yet, but the Reds are pretty confident at this stage. And with all of that in mind, I'm delighted to be joined by Portuguese football expert Tom Kundert to get the obvious lowdown on what Liverpool fans can expect from the player, who is a potentially exciting addition. Tom, thank you very much for joining me. I suppose the obvious question to start with is, what kind of player can Liverpool expect should this transfer deal go through?
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for asking me to start with. If I was a Liverpool fan now, like I just said to you before we started, there's no doubt about it. I would just be really excited. He is such an exciting player. I know you Liverpool fans aren't exactly, there's no scarcity of exciting football or exciting players at that club at the moment, but he's certainly in the mould of, those fantastic attackers which Liverpool have got. He's just such a potent attacking weapon, and I really am absolutely certain that Liverpool or really any other top club he would have gone to, he'd be a huge success.
What sort of position does he primarily play in? Is he a player that only plays off the left, or can he play in other positions as well?
Well, that's where he has played for Porto, and that's where he's been, just absolutely outstanding. And so as it's his best position, he's obviously, that's where he's always played. So I can't really say if he's, if he would have the same kind of output in different positions. I just think if you look at his qualities as a player and his, his ability, his skill, his ability to beat a man one-on-one, his goal instinct as well, which is something he's really added to his game a lot this season. He probably could play across the front line. I'm pretty sure he'd do a good job anywhere, but there's no doubt about it that, he's made that position, the left side of front three for Porto, he's just been absolutely devastating. He's been, without doubt, the best player in Portugal this season. And, it was inevitable that he was going to be sold for a lot of money. Just a little bit surprising, I think, that happened now. It seems like Liverpool have kind of jumped in there before Spurs, got him, because originally, of course, the last couple of days seemed like he was quite close to signing for Spurs. And I suppose Liverpool, who've been tracking him for a while, decided, that they weren't. This is a player they weren't going to, escape their grasp. And so you can understand that because, he's quite young still, 25, I think, 24, 25. So just kind of coming into his peak years. You've got a player there who, if he stays injury free, will just have be a superb addition, I think, to any team.
You mentioned there that he basically plays off the left-hand side for Porto. You'd imagine that it's probably going to be similar for Liverpool, but obviously Liverpool have Sadio Mane as well to put into that mix. Is there a similarity between the two players? Are they stylistically similar, or will Luis Diaz offer maybe something different for Jurgen Klopp?
Yeah, I don't watch an awful lot of Liverpool, so I'm perhaps not best qualified to answer that question. But unfortunately, of course, when I have seen Liverpool play against Portuguese sides recently against Porto, not very good memories from this side, from those encounters. But I think it's just, from what I've seen, obviously, I do watch kind of highlights of the English Premier League and catch a few games, and I think that maybe Luis Diaz is kind of a natural replacement, I would say, for Mane. Mane, I seem to remember, you'll know this obviously better than me, but he seemed to be maybe, at his peak a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, especially in terms of his goal scoring. I don't think he's, been so productive, has he, in recent months, maybe. And so, I think it, kind of a perfect replacement. I'd say he's, like I said, this season, Luis Diaz has really been absolutely incredible in his goal scoring, because he's top scorer here in Portugal, and not playing as a central striker, and as well as that, providing assists galore. And so, for an attack-minded team, and for a team like Liverpool, who spends the whole game on the front foot, much like FC Porto do, it just seems a perfect fit.
In terms of the price tag, it's an initial 37 million, we understand, and then another 12 million on top of that in add-ons, 49 million then as a kind of total big figure in terms of what it could reach. Is that a fair price, do you think? I know his release clause was around 66, 67 million, so it's a little bit less than maybe what Porto would have wanted.
Yeah, I'll have to tell you, Matt, Porto fans are absolutely up in arms about this. They, first of all, obviously, they're not happy that he's sold. Best player, Porto's best player in Portugal, hands down. In the middle of a season when they're going well, I suppose from Porto's point of view, I think they've got a 6-point gap. That's quite hard to make up in Portugal because the top teams are really so much further ahead than the majority. And maybe, I suppose, from Porto's thinking is they think they can keep this lead until the end of the season, but there's no doubt it will weaken them significantly. He's been there, he's won quite a few games, almost on his own this season. A couple of weeks ago, even, they were losing 3-2 to they were losing 2-0, at halftime to Estoril. Quite a decent side here, and completely turned it around in the second half, and that was all down to Diaz. Scored a goal, got an assist, and just completely tore apart the Estoril defence on his own. So yeah, they're not happy at all, and they said, in the past, Porto really well known for driving a hard bargain, almost always getting that release clause or very close to that release clause. And there's even been comparisons, I've seen quite a few comparisons, people saying that Luca Dean was sold for 25 million. Was it 25 million? They said just an extra 20 or so, and you're getting a player who's just incomparably better. Some people have pointed to the Bruno Fernandes sale and saying, I can't believe that actually, Sporting actually managed to get Sporting, who traditionally, don't sell their players so well. Actually, I've got a higher fee, it seems like Porto are going to get for Diaz. And so, yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think Liverpool, that will be money well spent. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, obviously, when a player goes to Liverpool, recent European champions, they're thinking about him staying there for many years. But imagine if 2 or 3 years he got itchy feet again, and if he develops the way most people in Portugal think he would develop, and he gets sold to, it'd obviously have to be someone like Barcelona, or if they can sort themselves out, or one of the huge clubs. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he got sold for double, or way over double what Liverpool bought for him.
What do you think that the reason is then behind them letting him go for less than his release clause? I mean, the line for weeks has been that if they were going to sell him for less, it would have to be in the summer. They wouldn't do it in January. But it seems that there's been a U-turn almost in that. Are they in financial troubles, or what?
Yeah, that's the easy answer, really, Matt. Yeah. It's just they need the money. They need the money badly because if they didn't need the money, there's no way that they'd sell. Because if he wasn't sold at this time, I think in a short amount of time there had been enough clubs interested to make sure that Porto did get that release clause. They did get the kind of full value for him, but they've had a lot of trouble the last 2, 3, 4 seasons. Porto with financial fair play, they actually had a period for I think about a year and a half where they couldn't buy anyone at all because they'd infringed the UEFA financial fair play rules. And then there's even quite recent reports that they and Sporting were in danger of actually being kicked out of European competitions if they didn't pay a certain amount. I think they had to pay a fine, or just basically sort out their finances a bit, put them in a bit of a better state. And so I suppose they see this, Porto see this as solving that problem for certainly the foreseeable future, maybe having these problems behind them for the next 2 or 3 years, because even though it's a fee which Porto fans especially, and I think most onlookers here in Portugal think that it's too cheap. Basically, Liverpool have got a good end of the deal. It's still a lot of money, isn't it? It's still a lot of money which is going to help solve their problems.
Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. And I'm sure a lot of people would have been sort of wondering whether that was going to be a good fee, a bad fee, but certainly think that sort of explains it a lot more. In terms of his sort of adaptation to English football and the Premier League, though, do you think he's well suited? Is he kind of physically robust enough to come into the Premier League, or will that take a little bit of time, do you think, to adapt to that?
Yeah, I'm sure that would be no problem at all. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a fallacy, Matt, here, that a lot of people think that the Portuguese league is, a very technical league, not very physical, and players, going into this kind of rough and tumble of the Premier League will struggle to adapt. But I think you just have a look at, some of the recent players who've gone into the Portuguese league have gone into the English league from Portugal, and they really don't have much trouble to adapt at all. I think Portuguese football is a bit more physical than people realise, and he himself is I'd say that's one of his strengths. Is you look at him, he doesn't seem to be kind of tremendously well built, but he is very strong physically, and he's not afraid of being kind of getting stuck in. And it's quite interesting, actually. This, he's basically a winger or wide player, but like I said, his goal scoring this season has really kind of gone through the roof, and he scored quite a few goals, maybe 2, 3, 4 goals, I don't know. Really just using his strength, and even headers. He scored, I think, 2 or 3 headers. Almost like a traditional centre forward. Where he's competing against a centre back, big burly centre back, and he gets his head on the ball, knocks it into the net. So. Yeah, I don't think the physicality would be a problem at all.
Yeah, I think there's only one player in Portugal that scored more headed goals than him this season, which is really, really interesting, because that's a huge part of what Sadio Mane and Diogo Jota have brought to Liverpool that maybe fans wouldn't have expected. I think that could be very, very similar in terms of Diaz as well. I mean, in terms of the goals, is there a kind of typical Luis Diaz goal? I'm sure Liverpool fans will have been watching the long range ones, or the one against Manchester City where he dribbles past 5 players and puts it in.
Yeah.
Is there a typical Luis Diaz goal, or is it more a case that he's quite a rounded player in that regard?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say his goals, the percentage of his goals, which are spectacular goals, is absolutely incredible. It's not like a player like him. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all the highlight reels now. I mean, just look at Copa America, isn't he? I think he scored 4, didn't he? And almost every one was, more spectacular than the previous one. And here in Portugal as well, he does tend to score a lot of really incredible goals. You'd say, a normal player would maybe score 1 of those or 2 of those a season, or maybe even in a career for some of them. But he kind of makes them his stock in trade. As for I think there is a goal which myself as a sporting fan actually had the displeasure of watching it live. Him scored his exact goal at Sporting earlier in the season. Very big game, of course, here. Porto are losing 1-0. He got the equaliser with an absolutely brilliant goal. And it's quite a typical one of his, where he picks up the ball on the left, towards the left flank, cuts inside, top of the box, and just curls it in to the far corner with his right foot. Absolutely superb goal. He scored that. And I think you've probably seen an absolutely identical goal he scored recently. I think it was against Vitória de Guimarães, not too sure, but it was Porto game at home, and the camera angle for that goal, you can actually see it on the Porto website. It's just absolutely incredible. It's one of the best filmed goals you'll ever see, because you can just see him cutting inside, running towards the defender. Defender's correctly positioned, kind of backtracking, but keeping quite close to him, not giving him too much space, but just enough space for him to skip past him, cut back towards the top of the box, and then just lever it. And it just went literally like an arrow right into the top corner, and the camera's right behind. So you just see this incredible shot, the goalkeeper. And then one thing about that goal, it's just, a thing of absolute beauty. And you have a look at the reaction of the Vitória de Guimarães, I think it was the Guimarães, where their defenders, and they just kind of, just slump, put their arms next to their sides, and they just kind of, what can you do about that? You can't do anything. So, yeah, it's a little bit like, of course, Robin, isn't it? Famously, Aaron Robin, who everyone knew what he'd do, but it didn't really help defenders, did it? He still couldn't stop him. And I'd say that's a little bit like these goals with Diaz. You know that when he picks it up and starts running at you down that left flank, there's always a chance he's going to cut inside and shoot. But knowing that he's going to do that is one thing. Stopping him doing it is another thing.
In terms of him being at this level and consistent, then, is that just something that you've seen this season, or was it sort of a longer period than that? I'm interested to sort of see how quickly Liverpool have decided that this is his level, when maybe for sort of 4 or 5 years with other players, they might have looked and then moved. It kind of seems quite quick for Liverpool to have made this decision on him.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's absolutely this season, Matt. It's absolutely he was a kind of player, he's been in Portugal for 2 or 3 years now, but he wasn't even last season. He wasn't even guaranteed starter for Porto. Porto, obviously, they're always a very strong team, got a very good squad, full of talented players. But, he was, he wasn't a guaranteed starter. He started most matches. And if he didn't start, he always came off the bench. And, he was still considered, and you could see he was one of their best players. But he wasn't an absolute, nailed on starter. This season, I think since Copa America, I think that must have given him such a boost in confidence. He's top scorer at that tournament alongside Messi. So, imagine what that does to your confidence. And he came back, and he was just, whereas in previous seasons, you'd look at him and maybe every 3 or 4 or 5 games, he'd do some incredible piece of skill or incredible run or score a brilliant goal, and you'd say, look at that, it's amazing. Instead of doing that, every 3 or 4 games, or maybe 4 or 5 games in previous season, this season he's been doing it virtually every game. I lose count of the amount of man of the match awards he's won, but he's basically been Porto's and the best player in Portugal, hands down. No one really argues with that. And so, and it's interesting because I don't know, I suppose the ability was always there. I suppose it's just another illustration that confidence is such a huge thing in this game, because he really does look like a different player this season. Not different in that he's doing things that he didn't seem capable of. Different in that he's just doing them consistently, every game. So this season, I'm sure if Klopp or the Liverpool scouting team had their eyes on him, and they probably had him down as one to watch. So like I say, I think he's been so good this season. They realised that he's not a kind of streaky player, and when Tottenham came in for him, they obviously realised they couldn't let him escape.
You mentioned Messi, and obviously matching him in terms of at the tournament and in South America, and obviously I've seen comparisons as well with Cristiano Ronaldo, the Colombian Ronaldo, that kind of thing. Is there a comparison that you'd make? Is the Ronaldo thing purely he plays on the wing and plays in Portugal, and that's kind of where that comes from, or is there an element of truth in that?
Yeah, I wouldn't really compare him to Ronaldo. Yeah, I think that's probably must be the Portuguese connection. How many times have we had the new Ronaldo? And there's be about 200 of them around there. Yeah, it's very much his own play. I was actually asked this yesterday. Who does he remind you of? And I couldn't really. It's quite difficult. I really can't. I couldn't put my finger on one player. Well-known player. I think because of that signature goal thing, I'd say quite similar to Robin, although of course he does it on the other side. Robin used to be in the right, then he come in, cut in, and shoot with his left foot, whereas Diaz is the opposite to that, on the opposite flank. So that's quite similar. But even his style, he's quite. I think he's quite. In some ways, he's quite languid. I always used to think of him in previous seasons as well. As you look at him as quite languid kind of player, but then on the other hand, he can just be absolutely electric. And those two things, they're kind of almost opposite adjectives, aren't they? But you can. It's just really such an exciting player. I think he's a bit of a one-off. He's just so. I think he's just really so supple. His body is so supple. He just manages to go ghost past players so fast. This game against Estoril really was a bit of an eye opener 2 or 3 weeks ago, because he just the way he just set up those goals, he just ghosted past the players with such ease, and yeah, it's just it's a pleasure to watch. It's going to be interesting actually to see I suppose obviously he will be, Liverpool haven't got a kind of lack of forwards, have they? It's going to be interesting to see, how he's used by Klopp, because definitely good enough, I think, to play, in the Premier League straight away. But, that's a pretty established front line, isn't it? Liverpool have got, can't see any of those players. Here in Portugal, we talk quite a lot about Jota and him having to be a bit patient. Probably any other team in the Premier League, he'd start every game, play 90 minutes every game. And now all of a sudden it's going to be another player to kind of try and fit into that starting lineup.
Yeah, it's a hugely exciting transfer if it does come off. Obviously, at the time of recording, the deal isn't yet done, but we will, of course, keep you updated across the Liverpool Echo, liverpool.com and Blood Red as soon as we have any more details. We did a special reaction podcast as well with our Liverpool correspondent, Paul Gorst, earlier on. If you missed that, you can find it in exactly the same place that you found this show. Diaz is, of course, set to play for Colombia on Friday night as well as they take on Peru. We're recording this show before that, so if you are listening afterwards, that's why we haven't mentioned it. But for now, my thanks to Tom for joining me and to you at home for listening as well. It might well be the right time to get excited about Luis Diaz.